and thank you for being here with me tonight. My name is Shamez Virani, and I'm the president and a partner at Centrecourt. In my 10 years at Centrecourt, I have never once done a market presentation, but I asked my team to set this up tonight and to invite all of you, our past and current purchasers, because I thought it was incredibly important to try and cut through some of the noise out there about the Toronto condo market and let you all know what I'm seeing and what we're talking about in the boardroom at Centrecourt. This past year has been unprecedented. We have never gone through anything like it before. So if your head is spinning and one of the things you're wondering about is what's happening with my investment in the Toronto condo market, you're not alone. Many people are having the same thought. And as you look out and read the sensationalized media headlines out there, you would be right to worry about what might be happening in the market. So tonight, I have one simple goal. I want to talk to you like I talk to my business partners and I talk to my lenders who have entrusted us with billions of dollars to invest and deploy in the Toronto condo market. And I want to share with you data and facts and information with real substance so that you can make an informed decision for yourself about what's happening in the market. To be clear, tonight is not a sales presentation. I am not here to sell you on anything. I'm here to talk to you and have an informed conversation about the data that we see and what that means for the current and future of the Toronto condo market. And I think to start, where I'd like to go is to talk about the Toronto condo market through a historical lens, and then talk about it on a broader geographical lens. I think it's important to have that broad context before we move into the pre-construction market and what we're seeing happening right now, as well as talking a little bit about the resale market, which I know is important to many of you who have existing condominium units throughout the city. And the last thing I want to share with you tonight is looking into 2021 and talking about some of the main factors and forces that are going to impact the Toronto condo market next year. If there's one visual you take away from tonight, it's this one. This is a chart showing real estate prices in Toronto over the past 25 years. This is actually the same chart that told me to pack my bags 11 years ago and move from New York and come to Toronto. And what this is showing you is that history is the best indicator of the future. We're in the middle of a crisis right now, absolutely. But if you look back in the history of our market over the last 25 years, it has sustained 3 other crises. It has sustained the dot-com burst in the early 2000s, it sustained the SARS pandemic shortly thereafter, and more recently it sustained the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. Those were massive shocks to the global economy, just the same way as COVID is right now. But what you can see in this chart is that despite these crises, the Toronto real estate market has continued to sustain an upward trajectory. And I can't think of another asset class or another investment category in the world that has done that. So now that we've taken a look at how the Toronto real estate market has performed over the last 25 years, I think it's important to put that in some sort of a geographic context. So what you see here is Toronto relative to the other major global cities in North America. And what you can take away from this visual is 2 key points. One, the Toronto market has consistently outperformed other cities in North America. And 2, when you look specifically at the dot-com crash and the financial crisis, Toronto, unlike those other cities, did not have a big nosedive. In fact, its trajectory just continued upwards. So this is the very reason why we at Centrecourt have chosen not to develop anywhere other than Toronto, because when we look at these other cities, we don't see the same exciting drivers of continued sustained growth that we see in Toronto. So when you see 25 years of upward trajectory and 25 years of outperforming other great global cities, it's natural to ask the question that you probably read in the headlines all the time. Is the Toronto condo market overvalued and too expensive? This visual gives you an indication of where Toronto's condo pricing is relative to other global markets across the world. And when you look at where Toronto stacks on this chart and you look at Hong Kong or London, who are 2.5 times more expensive than Toronto today, you quickly realize that on a global basis, Toronto is still very affordable. And this is actually one of the main drivers of why people from around the world are still flocking to Toronto and buying property in Toronto. Because when you look at Toronto relative to other major global cities, it is still very much affordable. So now that we've looked at the Toronto real estate market through a historical and a geographical lens, let's narrow in a little bit on what's happening in the pre-construction condo market in 2020 since the onset of the pandemic. What this slide is showing you is the last 15 years of continued price appreciation in the condo market. But what I really want you to take a look at is the most recent 4. What you see is since 2017, there has been massive appreciation in the high-rise condo market. And in the face of the global pandemic in 2020, our condo market has not only withstood and continued that level of growth, but it has continued to outperform. So this is an incredible story when you think about it, because a lot of the headlines and a lot of the messages you'll hear out there talk about the condo market in peril. Well, that's not what we're seeing on the ground. What we're seeing on the ground is people continue to pay more and more for pre-construction condo units in Toronto. The most recent market data that we have regarding the state of the Toronto condo market is to look at sales volumes in the third quarter of 2020. That is July, August, and September, since the pandemic has taken place. And the data is really telling. What you see here is that in the third quarter of this year, we had more condo units sold, over 6,000 units, than we have ever seen in the same period in the history of the Toronto condo market. People were buying units without even going into the sales centers, just through Zoom, telephone calls, emails. The market didn't slow down. It's continued to ramp up. And actually, we experienced this firsthand at Centrecourt. We launched our project 199 Church, a 39-story, 500-unit tower at the corner of Church and Dundas. And we saw within a matter of weeks, we were over 90% sold. The market continues to sell in great volume, and we've seen this in recent months. All of these towers that you see on screen have sold the vast majority of their units since the start of the COVID pandemic. This isn't an isolated story to 1 or 2 projects. There's been dozens of towers that have sold or nearly sold out since the start of the pandemic. So now that we've talked about the pre-construction market in Toronto, I know what many of you really want to know about is what's happening in the resale market. For those of you that own condos today, you're wondering what's happened to the pricing of my unit since the onset of COVID. So what we see here is pricing right off of MLS for Toronto condo units since January. And what you can take away from this slide is that in the worst part of the pandemic, in March and April, there was definitely a downturn in the market. We saw pricing drop significantly. But what I think is more telling is what happened in the couple of months following that. In May, June, and into the summer, we saw the market rebound in a really big way. And today, we're essentially at the exact same place as where we started the year. So in short, other than the blip during the first lockdown period of the pandemic, we have seen that resale pricing has largely held at the same place it was heading into 2020. So we've now taken a look at pricing in the resale market, but the next question is, well, what about volume? Are the buyers there at those prices? So what we're looking at now is a chart that shows the volume of sales over the course of 2020. And the story on volume is very much the same as the story on pricing. We saw a drop off in March and April when we went into lockdown. But right after that, the market rebounded and is right back at normal volume levels. So when you look at volume and you look at pricing and you say, well, what does that mean for 2020 in the resale condo market? What it means is that today you could sell your unit for the same price as the beginning of the year, and you would be able to find a buyer because there's a lot of transaction volume. So the resale market has completely withstood the worst part of the pandemic. So we've talked a lot about what's been happening in the Toronto condo market, but let's spend some time and talk about what are going to be the main drivers into the future. When we look at 2021, we think that the single largest driver of what's going to happen in our market will be the adoption of a vaccine for COVID. And we like to cut out the noise of the media and all the conversations that you're hearing happening at the political level. And we're going to a source that we believe, which is the chart that's in front of you, which is from Goldman Sachs, who advises the highest net worth individuals with trillions of dollars and advises the largest companies in the world, and has studied when the vaccine is going to be adopted and available. And what you're seeing here is that by their projections, this spring and early summer in Canada, the vaccine will be readily available to those that want it. So what that means is when you look forward into 2021, 2021 is going to feel a lot more normal than 2020 did. And at some point in the summer of 2021, things are going to get back to normal. And that to us is a huge driver of psychology and people's behavior as it relates to buying condos. Following the vaccine, the second most important driver to think about in looking at the future of our market is immigration. Immigration has been the single largest driver of the Toronto condo market for as long as I can remember. And this year, because of COVID, immigration levels were dropped significantly. But as a result of COVID, the government recently announced that they're actually going to increase the number of immigrants beyond the prior targets for the next few years, as a result of the impact that COVID has had to immigration levels this year and as a result of the impact that COVID has had to our economy. So the federal government has decided that one of our strategies for getting out of the COVID recession is to increase the number of immigrants that come to Canada. So 5 years from now, because of the COVID pandemic, we will actually have more new Canadians in Canada, and that is going to be a huge driver of future growth in our market. So the revised federal government immigration targets is a great story for Canada, but it's an even better story for Ontario and Toronto because a disproportionate percentage of immigrants come to Ontario. As you're seeing, nearly 50% of all immigrants to Canada end up in Ontario, and nearly 1/3 of all immigrants to Canada end up in Toronto, which is a way higher proportion than our actual population of the country. So Canada is going to benefit, but more specifically, Toronto is going to really benefit from the growth in immigration levels. No conversation about the future of real estate values is complete without looking at the interest rate picture. So when we look at the federal interest rate benchmark rates, what we see is that heading into the pandemic in the years prior, the federal government was raising interest rates. But as soon as the pandemic hit earlier this year, the federal government, as a response to the economic toll, decided to cut interest rates to near all-time lows. And they went a step further and they told the market that in 2021 and 2022, they're not going to increase interest rates. And you've all seen this. When you look at mortgage rates today, they're at all-time lows. That tells you that going into the next couple of years, we're going to continue to see an influx of cheap mortgage rates and cheap mortgage capital that is going to continue to propel our market forward. Thank you for sticking with me tonight. I know I've shared a lot and there's a lot to digest, but if there's three things you're going to take away from tonight, the first is that when you look at the Toronto real estate market over the past 25 years, we have withstood and grown through numerous shocks to our system. COVID pandemic is no different. The second is when you look at 2020 and how the Toronto real estate market has fared, the pre-construction market is on fire. We're setting records for volume of sales and pricing. The resale market is holding ground. It hasn't lost a step in 2020. And the third is that when you look to the future and you look to the drivers that are going to drive our market into the future, ultra high immigration levels, record low interest rates, the vaccine that's coming in a matter of months, you can see why there's optimism heading into 2021. And when you take those three things together, you'll understand why we at Centrecourt are putting our money where our mouth is and launching more projects in 2021 because we have a level of confidence both in the near and long term of this market. And I hope that after watching this tonight and seeing all the data and facts that you can come to a conclusion yourself and share that optimism that we have heading into 2021. I wish all of you and your families a very healthy and happy holiday season, and I hope to see you in person in 2021.